In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at what EC2 looks like from a Windows perspective and how I'd set up a Windows server and connect to that Windows server. So I just went through kind of a run through for myself about how to connect to a Windows server, and you can see I have this instance that's terminated. I use the free option on Windows, and the free options work great, but they're very slow. So what I want to do is I want to launch a Windows instance, but I'm going to pick a Windows instance that's scaled up a little bit. And it's not on the free tier, so I want to also show you a couple of things that we can do to manage the cost of running these non-free instances. So in the last demo, I had launched AWS Linux instance running Ubuntu, and you'll see that instance right here, it's running. What I want to do is, if I don't want to get rid of the instance, I want to keep it around. It's maybe my server, but I don't want to pay for it because it's I don't want to pay for it because it's not configured completely, or maybe I'm working on a project and I want to pay for it when I'm working on it and not pay for it when I'm not working on it. What I can do is I can go to the actions, I can go to the instance state, and I can stop it. So as long as the instance state is stopped, I'm not paying for it. Okay, so right now the instance state is stopping. Okay, and it takes a second here for it to stop, but eventually it'll stop. And what that does is it prevents me from connecting it. It's basically like shutting down that operating system. While the operating system shut down, I'm not paying for it. Okay, so as long as it's stopped, I'm not paying for it, life's good. And then I can always come back to it and say, yep, I want to work on it now. I want to start it back up. Okay, what I did with the Windows instance, because I thought it was running too slow, I terminated it. So I stopped it, and then I went to the actions, I went to the instance state and terminated it so that I would never start it back up and I would never end up paying for it. Okay, so with these EC2 instances, if you don't want to get billed for them, you can be running on the free tier and you won't get billed for one instance. But for this class, we're going to be working with multiple instances, so it's a good practice to always stop the instance state if you're not using them. Okay, so this is stopped. The Linux instance stopped. I wouldn't be able to connect to it. The operating system's essentially shut down. The Windows operating system that I had started up for my demo, for my personal demo, I stopped it, then I terminated it, so I threw it away. Like, I'm not going to use that instance anymore. What I want to do is I want to launch a Windows instance that's scaled up a little bit. So I say I want free tier only, and I would see a few Windows instances. Okay, so Windows Server 2019. I'm more comfortable with Windows Server 2016. I don't want the free tier only though. What I want to do is I want to choose that Windows 2016 base. So here it is. I want to select it. It's free tier eligible, so I guess I could have started there in the free tier. But what I want to do is I want to launch either a small or medium instance. Okay, so again, what's going to end up happening is I can get some details about it, so I can click on the details page, and you can kind of find out how much you're actually going to pay. Okay, so I get use cases, I get optimized, I get all sorts of information about this. If I want to see the cost, I don't know that it actually shows cost in here. Pricing is on the other. So T2 micro instances for 1 year. I can get reserved instances, I can get per second billing, I can get this AWS pricing calculator. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to get an estimate of how much it's going to cost for EC2. So the service that I'm looking for is EC2. I want to configure an instance. So a quick estimate, I'm going to run Windows Server. I want 2 virtual CPUs and 4 gigs of memory. Okay. I want 1 Want to run it for 1 year, storage amount. So my monthly cost is going to be $33.66. So $30 is for EC2 and then $3 for the storage. Okay? That's how much I'm paying. Now, I'm not going to use this for a year. I'm not going to pay up front. So if I pay up front, you'll see that the cost comes down. So my upfront cost becomes $353. And then I just pay the $3 a month for my block storage. Okay, so I have some options about how I'm going to pay for it. I'm not so concerned about it because I know I'm only going to run it for a short period of time. Okay, so I'm going back over to launch my EC2 instance. I'm choosing a T2 medium. That was the $30 a month. And then I'm going to review and launch it. Okay, it tells me that it's not free tier eligible. That's fine. I'm going to launch it. I'm going to create a new key pair. And the key pair that I want to use is MATC Windows Demo. And I'm going to download it. It already exists because I used it in my previous example. So I'm going to call this Demo 2. I'm going to download it. And I'm going to launch that instance. Okay, so while that instance is launching, so it's pending and initializing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this screencast until it's started and it's running. Okay, so now you'll see that my Windows instance is running and it's went through the status checks. I should be able to select it and try to connect. And with the Linux instance, you saw that I connected with SSH from a terminal window, and that's the best way to connect to Linux. Windows, what I'd suggest is that remote desktop is probably the best way to deal with a Linux instance. So what I want to do is I want to get a password for my instance. So when I get a password, it's asking me to choose a key file. I can grab my key file. And I need to decrypt the password. Okay, and then Remote Desktop is a piece of software that you would install that allows you to connect to different instances of Windows. I have Remote Desktop installed on my Mac. I downloaded it from the App Store, installed it. On Windows, it comes pre-installed with any of your desktop operating systems. So it's there. And then I'm going to go ahead and launch Remote Desktop. So Microsoft Remote Desktop. And I'm going to connect to a PC. So the PC name or IP address is going to be this DNS entry, this EC2 right here. And then my friendly name is going to be my MATC Windows EC2 instance. Okay, and then my user account, it says ask when required. I could do that, but what I want to do is I want to save it. So I'm going to say it's the administrator account, or I'm actually going to add a user account. So it's administrator. And then the password I just generated, so I can copy that to the clipboard. You can see it's the password. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect. Okay, so here it is. So I manually configured all of that in Microsoft Remote Desktop. I could have downloaded that Remote Desktop file, and it would have had those credentials already embedded, and it would have known that I'm connecting to this specific EC2 instance. So I wouldn't have had to type all that information in. So I was able to download that file if necessary. Okay, so eventually what's going to end up happening is somewhere I should have a full screen instance where I'm connecting to that Windows server. That Windows server is launching, and I don't want to connect, or don't want to be discoverable. Okay, and eventually what ends up happening is I have this black background, and it'll show kind of the EC2 instance information here in the background. So I know that it's not fully launched yet, so Windows is still working its way through. So eventually I get this host name, instance ID, all of this stuff up in the top right corner. Okay. So usually the first thing I do with a Windows operating system, and this is a bare bones Windows operating system, it has the Windows software and it has a few things to manage AWS, but really it's kind of a bare bones Windows install. Is the first thing I typically do is I'll install Chrome. So I'm just launching Internet Explorer here, and it has Internet Explorer Enhanced Security. I don't want to be tracked. Great. I don't really want this on. It's kind of a pain, but I should be able to turn it off somewhere. Managing, turning off Internet Explorer Enhanced Security. To turn off, open Server Manager if your server is running. Great. So I want to open up the Server Manager to turn this off. Otherwise, it's not going to allow me to download anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the Server Manager. And if I could type, here's the Server Manager. And somewhere in here, I should be able to remove. So local servers, I think Internet Explorer Enhanced Security, somewhere in here. Remove roles and features. For this machine, I think it's features. PowerShell, Windows Defender, .NET 4. I am not seeing Internet Explorer Enhanced Security here. Let's see if I can just cancel out of it, and maybe I have to go back through that dialog. That's not what I want. I want to turn it off. So open Server Manager. If it's running Windows 2008, it's not. If you're running 2012, configure the local server. Then in the properties area, local server properties, IE Enhanced Security right here is on. I'm going to turn it off for administrators. Okay, so now I should see that it's off. And now if I launch Internet Explorer again, let's try that again. Okay, and I want to go to Google. And I want to install Chrome, and I think that's that little pop-up over here on the right. So I want to switch to Chrome, yes. And that's going to allow me to download Chrome. I want to run the installer. And this isn't entirely necessary, but this is usually the first thing I like to do is I like to have a decent browser. So life's good, Chrome's my own. Close all my tabs. And now I should have Chrome installed. I'm going to pin Chrome to my desktop. Pin to start. and I'm going to add it to my taskbar down here. I should be able to just drag and drop it down. It's not allowing me to drag and drop it down. I'm not sure why. It's not letting me pin it, but I'm going to set it as my default. Chrome is my default. And life's good there. Okay, so I now have a Windows server that I'm able to use. And again, I have no software installed. Really, the purpose of this video was just to show you how to launch an EC2 Windows instance and then connect to that Windows instance using the remote desktop application. And then what I want to do kind of going forward is we now have two instances. I have a Linux instance and a Windows instance. I want to install some web server software to host a web application. Okay, so on the Linux side of things, I want to host a web application, so I'm going to write that web application in PHP. It'll be very simple, kind of a hello world type of thing. And then in the Windows world, I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it with a different type of application. So maybe it's a PHP application, but I want to host a web application on my Windows instance and then see that web application. Okay, so to wrap this up, what I want to do is I want to jump back over to, first of all, let's jump out of Microsoft Remote Desktop. So I can come over here to Windows, and I should be able to then click on and log off or disconnect from this remote computer. Okay, so this remote desktop option will stay here. But then I'm going to come over to my EC2 management tool. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that this instance is stopped so I'm not paying for it when it's not in use. When I come back to it, so when I want to come back and I want to create that web server and I want to host my web application, then I'll start it back up so that it's in this running state as opposed to my Linux instance, which is stopped. But for now, for the time being, I want both of those instances to be stopped. So I'm going to go to the actions, I'm going to go to the instance state, and I'm going to say stop it. Okay, and the cool thing about this is I can then start it back up at some later point in the future because I'm not paying for it when it's stopped. I can start it back up later in the future, and it'll have that Windows instance set up where I've disabled Internet Explorer Enhanced Security, and I've installed Chrome and made Chrome my default browser. All of that stuff is still persisted. So the things that I did in that instance are still persistent. It's just shut down at the moment and I'm not paying for it. Okay, that's the idea with EC2 is you pay for what you need. And that's how I want to wrap things up.